The diamond engagement ring hit the marble floor with a sharp ping as Amelia stared at her fiancé wrapped around her bridesmaid. 1 week later, Boston society whispered behind crystal champagne flutes about her mental breakdown and spectacular fall from grace. Marrying the quiet Japanese gardener was meant to be her escape from humiliation, a simple life with a simple man, until their wedding reception, when her ex drunkenly mocked her new husband's calloused hands. That's when Kenji removed his jacket, revealing intricate tattoos that made the entire room freeze in terror. Her simple gardener was anything but simple. From which city in the world are you watching this video today? If you enjoy stories of hidden identities and unexpected power shifts, please consider subscribing for more. The string quartet played a gentle melody that drifted across the Blackwood Estate's immaculately manicured lawn, mingling with the soft laughter of Boston's elite as they celebrated the engagement of the season. Crystal champagne flutes clinked, designer gowns whispered against the grass, and the spring air carried the scent of roses that had been imported specifically for the occasion. Everything was perfect, precisely as it should be, for the union of two of the city's most prestigious families. Amelia Blackwood stood at the edge of the gathering, a polite smile fixed on her face as she accepted yet another round of congratulations from people whose names she barely remembered, but who had apparently known her since childhood. At 28, she cut an elegant figure in her cream silk dress. Dark hair swept into controlled waves that framed her face. She wasn't conventionally beautiful in the way Boston society typically celebrated, not blonde or willowy, but she possessed a quiet dignity that, combined with her family name, made her a respectable match. "Amelia, darling, the Whitefields are asking about your honeymoon plans." Her mother's voice carried just enough edge to be noticed. Eleanor Blackwood approached with the practiced smile that had served her through 30 years of charity committees and social obligations. "They're considering Santorini for Abigail's wedding next year. Bryson is handling the arrangements," Amelia replied automatically. "He mentioned the French Riviera, but it's not finalized." Her mother nodded approvingly. "Excellent choice, much more suitable than your idea about Japan, far too foreign for a proper honeymoon." Amelia suppressed the urge to remind her mother that she spoke conversational Japanese and had always been fascinated by the culture, a detail Bryson had dismissed as an unusual hobby when she'd suggested Kyoto. Instead, she scanned the crowd for her fiancé, realizing she hadn't seen him for at least 20 minutes. "I should find Bryson," she said, excusing herself from her mother's orbit. The photographer wanted some sunset photos by the fountain. As she made her way through the crowd, she caught fragments of conversations that momentarily froze her steps. Lucky timing on her part, settling down just when everyone wondered if she'd become one of those career-obsessed spinsters. Bryson's quite the catch. The Westfields were considering the Cavendish girl, you know. Much prettier, but apparently lacking the proper temperament. Amelia continued walking, her smile never faltering, even as the words settled like stones in her stomach. 3 years at Wharton for her MBA, developing the Blackwood Foundation's education initiative across Massachusetts, and still she was reduced to settling down just in time and lucky to have caught Bryson's attention. The South Lawn was quieter, guests thinning as she moved away from the main celebration. The setting sun cast long shadows across the grass, and the sounds of the party faded into background murmurs. She checked the fountain area, no sign of Bryson. Perhaps he'd stepped inside the house to take a business call. He'd done that twice already, apologizing with a charming smile about markets never sleeping. A feminine laugh, light and slightly breathless, caught her attention. It came from the direction of the greenhouse, her greenhouse, the place where she cultivated rare orchids as her one genuine indulgence. Amelia followed the sound, steps slowing as she approached the glass structure that glowed golden in the evening light. Through the slightly fogged glass, she could make out 2 figures. One was unmistakably Bryson, his tall frame and golden hair instantly recognizable. The other was Olympia Van Houten, her bridesmaid and supposed friend since preparatory school. They weren't simply talking. Bryson's hands were tangled in Olympia's perfectly highlighted hair, her back pressed against the orchid table that Amelia had specifically placed to catch the morning light. Amelia stood frozen, her mind cataloging details with strange detachment. Olympia's lipstick smeared across her chin, Bryson's collar unbuttoned, the orchid pot knocked sideways, spilling soil onto the floor she'd had specially installed to maintain proper humidity. The logical part of her brain suggested she should burst in, create a scene worthy of the betrayal unfolding before her. Instead, she stepped back silently, turned, and walked with measured steps back toward the party. Her face arranged itself into the pleasant mask she'd perfected through years of society functions, revealing nothing of the earthquake that had just shattered her carefully planned future. For the remaining 2 hours of the engagement party, Amelia played her role flawlessly. She smiled at appropriate moments, thanked the Astors for the sterling silver serving tray, discussed seating arrangements with the wedding planner, and even managed a convincing laugh when Bryson returned to her side, smoothing his hair and whispering an apology about getting caught on an important call with Tokyo markets. Only when the last guest had departed and she was alone in her wing of the Blackwood mansion did the mask finally crack. She sat at her vanity, removing diamond earrings that had been her grandmother's, and looked at her reflection. What stared back wasn't the poised, controlled woman Boston society saw, but someone lost, betrayed, and suddenly uncertain of every choice that had led to this moment. The engagement ring caught the light, 3 perfect carats that felt increasingly like a shackle rather than a promise. She twisted it off and placed it on the vanity, the simple action bringing the first genuine relief she'd felt all evening. That night, she barely slept. Instead, she found herself revisiting moments from her relationship with Bryson with new clarity. His subtle comments about her wardrobe choices. "That color washes you out, darling." His dismissal of her work at the foundation. "Charming that you keep busy." His gradual isolation of her from friends he deemed not quite our circle. Each memory revealed another thread in a pattern she'd been too close to see. Morning arrived with harsh clarity. Amelia dressed with particular care, selecting a simple blue dress that, Bryson had once said, made her look approachable rather than elegant. She wore her grandmother's pearls, family heirlooms that predated any connection to the Westfields. When her phone chimed with Bryson's arrival, she took a deep breath and went downstairs to meet him. He waited in the morning room, golden and perfect in the spring light streaming through tall windows. His smile was practiced charm as he crossed to kiss her cheek. "You look tired, darling. Late night?" The party was a tremendous success. Mothers already received calls about your exquisite taste in champagne. Amelia placed the ring box on the table between them. "The engagement is over, Bryson." His expression flickered briefly before settling into concerned confusion. "What are you talking about? Is this about the Tokyo markets call? I apologize for disappearing, but Harrison insisted the numbers couldn't wait." "I saw you in the greenhouse," she said simply. "With Olympia." The transformation was immediate. Concern vanished, replaced by calculation as he assessed this new situation. "Darling, you misunderstood what you saw. Olympia was emotional about her own relationship problems, and I was comforting her as a friend." "Please don't insult my intelligence." His charm slipped further. "These things happen, Amelia. Meaningless indiscretions. Surely you're not naive enough to throw away our future over something so trivial." When she didn't respond, his approach shifted again. "Think carefully about what you're doing. The invitations are addressed. Both our families have made significant arrangements. Your father's company and mine have aligned interests pending our marriage. I'm aware of the complications," she said. "I'm still ending our engagement." Bryson's handsome face hardened. "No one will believe you. You know, Olympia certainly won't confirm your little story. It will look like another of your anxious episodes, poor Amelia having second thoughts, unable to commit." The reference to her anxious episodes, a narrative Bryson himself had cultivated after she had expressed doubts about their compatibility 6 months earlier, sent cold clarity through her. "Take the ring, Bryson. We're finished." His final expression as he left was one of smug certainty. "You'll regret this by tomorrow, Amelia. Call me when you're ready to apologize." She didn't call the next day, or the day after. By the 3rd day, Boston's social circles buzzed with a very different version of events than reality. According to carefully placed rumors, Amelia had suffered an emotional breakdown, accusing poor Bryson of imagined infidelities, driven by insecurity and possibly medication issues. Olympia expressed public concern for her dear friend's mental well-being, while pointedly removing herself from the bridal party of a wedding everyone assumed would still happen once Amelia received proper help. The invitations were never sent, but the damage was comprehensive. Dinner invitations mysteriously disappeared. Charitable committee meetings were rescheduled without informing her. Former friends responded to texts with formal politeness that made clear which side they had chosen. Her parents, while not directly accusatory, made their disappointment evident in subtle ways. Her father's sudden interest in late nights at the office, her mother's pointed comments about managing public perception, and salvaging the family name. 2 weeks after the greenhouse incident, Amelia found herself increasingly retreating to the estate gardens, the one place where whispers couldn't follow. The sprawling grounds had been in the Blackwood family for generations, each section meticulously maintained to showcase wealth and taste without appearing ostentatious. The rose garden, with its carefully cultivated heritage varieties, had always been her favorite sanctuary. She sat on a stone bench partially hidden by climbing constant spry roses, their pale pink blooms just beginning to open. The morning's fresh disappointment, discovering Bryson was already publicly dating Cordelia Pierce from the museum board, felt distant here among the gentle perfume of flowers that cared nothing for Boston society drama. The quiet snip of pruning shears brought her attention to the gardener, working methodically among the David Austin specimens several feet away. Kenji Nakamura had maintained the Blackwood estate grounds for 3 years, a quietly efficient presence who spoke little, but transformed the gardens into living art. In her frequent retreats to the gardens over the past 2 weeks, she'd nodded polite greetings, but otherwise maintained the boundary between employer and staff. Today, something about his focused attention on the roses, careful, respectful, completely present in his task, made her watch longer than usual. His hands moved with precision, each cut deliberate, his expression contemplative rather than merely dutiful. When he stood to move his tools to the next section, he noticed her observation and offered a respectful nod. "Miss Blackwood?" "Good morning, Mr. Nakamura," she replied. "The constant sprays are particularly beautiful this year." A flicker of surprise crossed his features, perhaps at her knowledge of the rose variety, or perhaps that she'd initiated conversation at all. Yes, they responded well to the new organic feeding program. He seemed ready to continue his work, but Amelia found herself reluctant to return to silence. "I noticed you removed the Adelaide d'Orléans from the south trellis. Was it diseased?" Kenji set down his tools and turned to face her properly. "Not diseased, but failing to thrive. Sometimes what looks perfect from outside is rotting within." The simple statement, delivered without any apparent subtext, nonetheless struck Amelia with unexpected force. "What did you replace it with?" "Climbing iceberg, more resilient, blooms repeatedly through summer." He hesitated, then added, "Less showy, but stronger." "Sometimes we have to cut away what's damaged to allow for new growth," she said, more to herself than to him. Kenji nodded. "In gardens and in life." The conversation wasn't long. Perhaps 5 minutes of discussion about rose varieties and the philosophy of pruning. But it was the first genuine interaction Amelia had experienced in weeks. No hidden judgments, no carefully veiled references to her situation, no social calculations. Just roses, growth, resilience. Over the following days, she found herself increasingly drawn to the gardens during Kenji's working hours. Their conversations remained largely about horticulture, but occasionally ventured into Japanese culture when she mentioned her interest in the language, or touched on art when they discussed the aesthetic balance of the garden design. He spoke more with her than she'd ever observed him speaking with anyone else. His English precise, though accented, his observations thoughtful. She learned he had been in America for 5 years, that he lived alone in a small apartment near the commuter rail, that he read extensively about native plants and sustainable gardening techniques. What she didn't learn was anything personal about his past in Japan, or why a man with his evident intelligence and knowledge chose to work as a gardener in a country not his own. The questions felt intrusive, so she never asked. 3 weeks after her broken engagement, Amelia attended her first social function, a gallery opening her mother insisted would begin the process of reestablishing normality. The evening proved excruciating. Conversation stopped when she approached, resumed in whispers when she passed. Bryson arrived with Cordelia on his arm, making a show of magnanimous acknowledgement with a wave from across the room, but never approaching directly. "Amelia, darling, you're creating a scene just standing here alone," her mother hissed after an hour of this treatment. "Speak with the Wellingtons about their summer plans. Appear engaged and pleasant." "I've tried, Mother." Margaret Wellington literally turned and walked in the opposite direction when I approached. Eleanor Blackwood's lips thinned. "This situation would resolve much faster if you'd simply apologize to Bryson. Whatever misunderstanding occurred—" "It wasn't a misunderstanding," Amelia cut in, voice low but firm. "And I won't apologize for ending an engagement to someone who betrayed me." "Lower your voice," her mother whispered furiously. "Your father and I have supported your decision, despite the embarrassment and the questions. The least you could do is make an effort to repair the social damage." Amelia looked around the gallery at the people she'd known all her life, people who had celebrated her engagement, who had been prepared to attend her wedding, who now treated her like a pariah based on nothing but malicious gossip. The crushing weight of it all suddenly clarified into a single, liberating realization. Their good opinion no longer mattered to her. "I'm leaving," she said simply. "Please make my excuses if anyone actually notices." The drive home in the back of her family's town car felt like escape. The chauffeur maintained professional silence, leaving Amelia to watch the city lights blur past and contemplate the hollow feeling that had once been her social identity. By the time they pulled through the estate gates, she had made a decision without fully understanding its implications. She was finished with trying to reclaim her place in a world that had so readily discarded her. The house was quiet, her parents still at the gallery event. Rather than returning to her wing, Amelia found herself drawn once more to the gardens, now silvered with moonlight and fragrant with night-blooming jasmine. She hadn't expected to find anyone there at this hour, but a single light illuminated the small garden shed where tools were stored. Kenji emerged as she approached, clearly surprised to find her there. He wore simple work clothes, evidence of soil on his knees, suggesting he'd been preparing new plantings for the next day. "Miss Blackwood," he acknowledged with a slight bow. "Is everything all right?" "Not particularly," she admitted, the pretense of proper employer-employee distance suddenly exhausting. "Though the gardens are lovely in the moonlight." He nodded, following her gaze across the silvered landscape. "The night reveals different beauty than the day." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, and Amelia found herself studying his profile, the quiet dignity in his bearing that she'd never properly noticed before. He wasn't handsome in the way her social circle valued, but his features had a harmonious quality, a calmness that seemed increasingly valuable in her turbulent world. "Mr. Nakamura," she said suddenly, the idea forming even as she spoke, "may I ask you something unusual?" "Of course." "Would you ever consider marrying someone like me?" The question hung in the moonlit garden, as shocking to her own ears as it must have been to his. Kenji turned to face her fully, his expression careful, but not dismissive. "That is indeed an unusual question," he said finally. "May I ask why you would consider marrying someone like me?" The honesty of his response, a question rather than an immediate rejection, gave her courage to continue this strange conversation. "Because you see clearly. You understand that things appearing perfect can be rotting within. You create beauty through careful attention rather than grand gestures. And because you're the only person in weeks who hasn't looked at me with pity or judgment." Kenji was silent for a long moment, his gaze steady. "Marriage is a serious commitment in my culture, not to be entered for impulsive reasons or to make a point to others." "I understand," she said, embarrassment beginning to rise. "I apologize for the inappropriate suggestion." "I didn't refuse," he clarified. "I only wish to understand your reasons. They are better than many I have heard." Amelia felt suspended between madness and the most rational decision she'd ever contemplated. "And what would your reasons be if you considered such an arrangement?" "Someone should be honored to marry you, Miss Blackwood," he said simply. "You have kindness beneath your formal manner. You notice details others ignore. You speak to me as a person, not as a function. That's hardly a reason to accept such a proposition." "Perhaps not," he acknowledged, "but it is a beginning." The conversation should have ended there, a strange moonlight exchange born of her emotional distress, forgotten by morning. Instead, Amelia found herself saying, "Would tomorrow be too soon to discuss this further? Perhaps over tea in the conservatory." Kenji's slight smile contained something she couldn't quite interpret, Surprise, certainly, but also something like quiet amusement or private knowledge. I will be there at noon, if that suits you. The following morning, Amelia woke with the absolute certainty that she should call off the tea and pretend the conversation had never happened. By 11, she had changed her outfit 3 times. By 11:30, she was arranging fruit and small sandwiches on her grandmother's best silver serving tray. At precisely noon, she sat in the conservatory, sunlight streaming through the glass ceiling, and waited for either salvation or complete humiliation. Kenji arrived exactly on time, dressed in clean work clothes, his hair still damp from a recent shower. He carried himself with the same quiet dignity she had observed in the garden, neither presumptuous nor overly deferential. They spent 2 hours in careful conversation, practical, direct, surprisingly comfortable. By the time he returned to his duties, they had outlined a shocking proposal, a marriage of mutual respect and shared purpose, if not traditional romance. She would gain independence from the suffocating expectations of her social circle. He would receive legal residency and the chance to build something he spoke of only in general terms. That evening, Amelia stood in her father's study, back straight, voice steady, and informed her stunned parents that she intended to marry Kenji Nakamura, the estate gardener. Her mother's teacup clattered against its saucer. Her father's fountain pen created an expanding ink stain on the financial documents before him. "This is absurd," Eleanor Blackwood finally managed. "If this is some misguided attempt to punish us for not taking your side against Bryson—" "It has nothing to do with Bryson," Amelia interrupted. "I'm making a choice that serves my happiness rather than social expectations." Spencer Blackwood found his voice at last. "Amelia, be reasonable. You barely know this man. He's an employee, a foreigner, completely unsuitable for someone of your background." "I know he treats living things with care and respect," she replied. "I know he sees beauty in what others overlook. I know he values substance over appearance. That seems a stronger foundation than many marriages in our circle." The argument continued for hours, cycling through threats, disinheritance, bargaining, a year abroad to clear her head, accusations, emotional instability, and finally grim resignation when it became clear Amelia would not be moved. She left her father's study with their reluctant agreement to attend a civil ceremony as witnesses, though they refused any further participation or acknowledgement. As she prepared for bed that night, Amelia caught her reflection in the vanity mirror, the same one where she had removed Bryson's ring 3 weeks earlier. The woman who looked back at her now appeared different somehow, less polished perhaps, but with a clarity in her eyes that had been missing before. She was stepping into complete uncertainty, abandoning every expectation laid out for her since birth. Yet, for the first time in memory, she felt curiously, completely free. The civil ceremony took place on a Tuesday morning at the Boston City Hall, a pragmatic affair lacking any of the pageantry that had been planned for Amelia's cathedral wedding to Bryson. She wore a simple white dress purchased the day before, her dark hair arranged in loose waves rather than the elaborate updo her mother's stylist had once sketched for the society pages. Kenji wore his only suit, charcoal gray, slightly dated in cut but meticulously pressed, with a blue tie that complemented Amelia's eyes in a coincidence neither had planned. Eleanor and Spencer Blackwood stood as required witnesses, their faces frozen in identical masks of polite disapproval. They had arrived separately from Amelia, making their symbolic distance from her decision clear, and planned to leave immediately after signing the necessary documents. No other guests attended. Amelia had informed no one, and Kenji had mentioned no family or friends to invite. The ceremony itself lasted less than 10 minutes. The city clerk, accustomed to processing dozens of marriages each day, showed no reaction to the obvious social disparity between the couple before him. He pronounced them husband and wife with the same efficiency he might have used to renew a driver's license, had them sign the register, and moved on to the next appointment. In the echoing marble hallway outside the clerk's office, Eleanor finally broke her rigid composure. "I sincerely hope you know what you're doing, Amelia," she said, voice tight. "Your father has arranged for your trust fund to remain accessible to you personally, despite our misgivings. At least you won't be completely destitute when this ill-considered experiment inevitably ends." "Thank you for coming, Mother," Amelia replied evenly. "I understand this isn't what you wanted for me." Spencer Blackwood cleared his throat uncomfortably. Mr. Nakamura, I trust you understand the significance of the family name my daughter carries. Kenji, who had remained respectfully silent throughout the tense exchanges, bowed slightly. I understand its importance to you both, he said, his accented English precise and formal. I will honor Amelia's choice to maintain it. This acknowledgement that Amelia would remain a Blackwood rather than taking her new husband's surname seemed to provide Spencer with marginal relief. He nodded stiffly, then checked his watch. We have a foundation board meeting at 11. Congratulations to you both. With those perfunctory words, the Blackwoods departed, leaving the newlyweds standing alone in the government building's austere hallway. Are you all right? Kenji asked quietly when her parents had disappeared from view. Amelia took a measured breath. Yes, this is exactly what I expected. And what would you like to do now, as your first act as a married woman? The question held no presumption, simply practical consideration. Amelia appreciated its directness after weeks of veiled social niceties and judgment. I believe traditional wisdom suggests we should share a meal, she replied. I made a reservation at Haruki's. I thought you might appreciate something familiar today. Something flickered in Kenji's expression. Surprise, perhaps even approval. Haruki's is an excellent choice. Not many Bostonians know of it. The restaurant was located in a narrow side street of Boston's small but vibrant Japanese district, its exterior unmarked, except for a traditional Norin curtain hanging in the doorway. Amelia had discovered it during her exploration of Japanese culture years earlier, though she had only dined there occasionally, usually alone with a book of language exercises. As they entered, the elderly hostess bowed deeply, speaking rapid Japanese that Amelia couldn't fully follow with her intermediate language skills. Kenji responded in kind, his tone respectful, but with an authority she hadn't heard in his English conversations. The woman's eyes widened slightly before she bowed again, even more deeply, and led them not to the main dining room, but to a private space toward the back of the restaurant. The room was traditionally arranged with tatami flooring, low table, and minimalist decorative elements, a single calligraphy scroll on one wall, a small ikebana flower arrangement in the tokonoma alcove. Through paper screen doors, Amelia glimpsed what appeared to be a small garden. This is lovely, she said as they were seated. I've never been offered this room before. It's typically reserved for special guests, Kenji replied, settling comfortably into the formal seating position. Before she could inquire further, the door slid open to admit an older man in a traditional chef's uniform. He bowed deeply to them both. Haruki-san, Kenji acknowledged. It has been some time. Takahashi-san, the man replied with evident respect, before seeming to catch himself. Nakamura-san, forgive me, and your honored wife. Amelia noted the slip but didn't comment, attributing it to the confusion of languages. The owner spoke briefly with Kenji in Japanese, too quick for her to follow, before bowing again and withdrawing. I hope you don't mind, Kenji said to her after Haruki had left. I've taken the liberty of requesting an omakase meal. The chef will prepare what he believes is best today. That's perfect, she agreed. I trust his judgment. A younger server entered with tea, presenting it with elaborate ceremony before departing silently. Left alone, Amelia and Kenji regarded each other across the low table, now husband and wife, yet still largely strangers. You speak Japanese far more fluently than you've ever demonstrated at the estate, Amelia observed. Where did you learn? A smile touched Kenji's lips. I was born in Tokyo. It would be concerning if I didn't speak the language fluently. Of course, she acknowledged, feeling slightly foolish. I suppose there's a great deal I don't know about you. As there is much I don't know about you, he replied, though I've observed more than you might expect during my time at your family's estate. Before Amelia could ask what he meant, the door slid open again. This time, the intrusion wasn't the restaurant staff, but a group of unexpected visitors. Bryson Westfield stood in the doorway. Olympia and two other members of their social circle crowded behind him. All showed signs of having been drinking despite the early hour, their formal lunch attire slightly disheveled, eyes bright with artificial merriment. Well, well, Bryson drawled, taking in the private room with exaggerated interest. When Harrison said he spotted Amelia Blackwood sneaking into a back-alley Japanese place, I simply had to see, for myself, and with company no less. Amelia's spine straightened instinctively. Bryson, this is a private celebration. So we heard, Olympia chimed in, her perfect features arranged in mock sympathy. The courthouse ceremony was this morning, wasn't it? So efficient compared to all those tedious cathedral arrangements we had to cancel. Bryson stepped fully into the room, uninvited, the others following like an entourage. We were having lunch at Maison just around the corner. Pure coincidence running into you on your special day. His gaze shifted to Kenji, taking in the simple suit with poorly disguised contempt. And this must be the fortunate groom. Kenji remained seated, his posture relaxed yet alert. He inclined his head slightly but offered no verbal response to Bryson's provocation. Not much of a talker, is he? Bryson addressed Amelia while gesturing toward Kenji. Language barrier, I suppose. Does he understand what's happening, or did you just lead him through the ceremony with hand signals? Olympia giggled, covering her mouth with manicured fingers. Amelia always did have unusual hobbies. Remember her Japanese calligraphy phase? Though I must say, bringing home a souvenir from your interests is taking things rather far. The crude joke hung in the air. Amelia felt heat rising in her face. Not embarrassment, but anger at the deliberate cruelty of people she had once considered friends. I think you should leave, she said, her voice steadier than she felt. This is our wedding celebration. Wedding celebration, repeated James Harrison, one of Bryson's banking colleagues, with obvious mockery. From Tiffany diamonds to garden tools, quite the downgrade, Blackwood. Bryson's expression shifted to one of false concern. We're simply worried about you, Amelia. Everyone is. First the bizarre accusations, then disappearing from society, and now this impulsive marriage. Your poor parents must be devastated. Throughout this exchange, Kenji had remained silent, observing with unnerving calm. Amelia noticed the restaurant owner hovering anxiously at the door, clearly distressed by the intrusion, but uncertain how to intervene with clients from such prominent families. My husband and I would appreciate privacy, Amelia stated firmly. Please leave. Husband, Bryson repeated, focusing his attention on Kenji for the first time. Tell me, does he understand English well enough to know he's just a rebound? A living, breathing middle finger to Boston society? Kenji finally spoke, his voice quiet but clear. I understand perfectly, Mr. Westfield. Now I must ask you and your friends to leave. You're disrupting our meal. Something about Kenji's calm response seemed to inflame Bryson further. Perhaps he had expected broken English or submissive behavior, not the measured dignity with which Kenji addressed him. Everyone knows you married him to humiliate me, Bryson continued, ignoring the request to leave. Though, I must say, you've mainly succeeded in humiliating yourself. The gardener, Amelia? Really? Does he still have dirt under his fingernails when he touches you? Amelia stood abruptly, napkin falling to the floor. That's enough. Get out, all of you. Or what? Bryson challenged, his handsome face ugly with malice. Your pathetic excuse for a husband will throw us out? Does he even know who we are? Throughout this escalating confrontation, Amelia noticed subtle changes in Kenji's demeanor. Though still seated calmly, something in his posture had shifted, a straightening of his spine, a subtle repositioning of his hands. Most notably, his left hand now rested on the table, in a way that revealed a slight anomaly she had never noticed before. The last joint of his little finger was missing. The restaurant staff had withdrawn completely. The owner engaged in urgent whispered conversation with other employees just outside the door. The atmosphere in the room had changed, tension thickening the air despite Kenji's outward calm. I know exactly who you are, Kenji said at last, his voice somehow different, deeper, more commanding. A man who believes wealth equates to worth. A man who mistreats women and expects no consequences. A man so insecure he must belittle others to feel powerful. Bryson laughed, though the sound held no genuine amusement. Philosophy from a gardener. How enlightening. He reached for the sake bottle that had been set on the table, pouring a measure into Kenji's cup with deliberate disrespect, sake splashing onto the table. Show us if a gardener can handle his liquor like a real man. The room grew unnaturally quiet. Amelia saw restaurant staff retreating further, creating distance while watching intently. Even Bryson's friends seemed to sense the shifting atmosphere, their mocking smiles faltering as something indefinable changed in the energy of the confrontation. With deliberate movements, Kenji removed his suit jacket, folding it carefully and setting it aside. Then he rolled up his left shirt sleeve, revealing the edge of what appeared to be an intricate tattoo extending from under the fabric. "What are you doing?" Olympia asked, her voice suddenly uncertain. Bryson, not noticing the subtle tension that had gripped his companions, continued his mockery. "Showing us your gardening bruises, or is that dirt permanently embedded in your skin?" "You disrespect my wife," Kenji said, his voice now completely transformed from the quiet gardener Amelia had known. "You disrespect this place. You have one opportunity to leave with dignity." Bryson laughed again and reached to grab Kenji's arm mockingly. Or what exactly? What happened next occurred with such fluid precision that Amelia could barely process the sequence. Kenji moved slightly, not violently but with controlled purpose, repositioning himself so that Bryson's grasping hand missed its target. In the same motion, he rolled his sleeve higher, revealing more of the tattoo that decorated his arm. It wasn't just any tattoo, but an intricate, masterful irizumi, traditional Japanese artwork, featuring a golden dragon winding through cherry blossoms, extending from his wrist upward to disappear beneath his shirt collar. The craftsmanship was extraordinary, clearly the work of a master artist using traditional techniques. The effect on the room was immediate and astonishing. Haruki, who had reappeared in the doorway, immediately dropped to his knees, head bowed deeply. Every staff member visible behind him followed suit in perfect unison, creating a wave of deference that rippled through the restaurant. Bryson froze mid-motion, his hands still extended, but now trembling slightly. The color drained from his face so rapidly, it was as if someone had pulled a plug, allowing all his confidence to leak away in an instant. His eyes, fixed on the tattoo, widened with unmistakable recognition and fear. "You're Takahashi?" The name emerged as barely more than a whisper, a question laden with horror and disbelief. "But you're supposed to be dead," Kenji, or Takahashi, supplied calmly. "Yes, that was the intention. Yet, here I stand." Amelia looked between them in growing confusion. The Kenji she had married hours earlier had vanished, replaced by someone who held himself with unmistakable authority. More confusing was Bryson's reaction, genuine terror from a man who had never shown fear of anything. The restaurant owner remained on his knees, speaking rapid Japanese. Kenji responded with a brief command that immediately sent the man backing from the room, still in a bow. "What's happening?" Olympia whispered, tugging at Bryson's sleeve. "Who is he?" Bryson didn't answer, his attention fixed on Kenji with the horrified fascination of a rabbit before a snake. He swallowed hard before finding his voice again. "Takahashi-san," he said, honorific attached automatically. "I had no idea. This is just a misunderstanding." "She said she's not your girlfriend," Kenji replied, repeating Amelia's earlier statement with a finality that brooked no argument. "She is my wife. You will address her with respect, or not at all." Bryson nodded frantically. "Of course. Yes, absolutely. Mrs. Takahashi, Ms. Blackwood, please accept my sincere apologies for any disrespect." The complete reversal of his behavior left Amelia speechless. Moments earlier, he had been sneering and contemptuous. Now, he appeared terrified to the point of physical illness. Kenji's posture straightened fully, no longer hiding his true bearing. "I am not a gardener playing at marriage," he stated, each word precise and measured. "I am Kenji Takahashi, heir to the Takahashi Gumi. I honor my wife with my name and my protection." At these words, Bryson's knees actually buckled. Harrison grabbed his arm to keep him upright, his own face ashen with shock. Olympia and their other friend backed toward the door, confused but recognizing the radical shift in power. "Takahashi-san," Bryson managed, his voice shaking, "please forgive my disrespect. I didn't know." "You disrespected a woman worthy of honor," Kenji replied coldly. "You disrespected a man you thought couldn't harm you. That reveals character, not ignorance." With trembling hands, Bryson performed a deep, formal bow, jarringly out of character for the arrogant man Amelia had known for years. "My most sincere apologies. This will never happen again." "No, it will not." The simple statement carried weight beyond its words, a promise, or perhaps a threat. Kenji made a small gesture toward the door. Without another word, Bryson straightened from his bow and backed toward the exit, never turning his back to Kenji. His friends followed in confused haste, Olympia glancing back once with wide, uncomprehending eyes before they all disappeared. As they exited, two men in dark suits appeared in the doorway, taking positions on either side. They bowed deeply to Kenji, who acknowledged them with a slight nod. Amelia realized with a jolt that these men had not been in the restaurant earlier. They had arrived somehow in response to the confrontation. The door slid closed, leaving Amelia alone with the stranger who was apparently her husband. The silence stretched between them, filled with unasked questions. Finally, Kenji, or Takahashi, turned to her, his expression softening slightly. "I owe you an explanation," he said, the authoritative tone gentling, though not disappearing completely. "Yes," Amelia agreed, finding her voice at last. "I believe you do." Kenji removed a black lacquered box from an inner pocket of his discarded jacket. He opened it to reveal an elegant ring, not a diamond, but a band of intricate metalwork inlaid with what appeared to be jade, carved with a family crest she didn't recognize. "This should have been given to you this morning," he said, "but I wanted to be certain of your choice before offering my true self." "And who is your true self?" Amelia asked, struggling to reconcile the quiet gardener she had impulsively married with the man before her now. A man whose mere identity had reduced Bryson Westfield to trembling deference. "I am Kenji Takahashi, eldest son of Hideo Takahashi, former head of the Takahashi Gumi," he said. "In your country's understanding, what would be called Yakuza. My father was assassinated 3 years ago by rivals who believed they also killed me. I have been living with altered identity while rebuilding my resources and identifying the traitors responsible." He presented the ring on an open palm, not placing it on her finger, but offering it for her consideration. "Our marriage is legally binding, but this represents the true family name you have joined. If you wish to end our arrangement now that you know the truth, I will understand and provide for your complete security." Amelia stared at the ring, her mind racing to process everything that had just occurred, the absolute terror in Bryson's eyes when he recognized Kenji, the immediate deference of the restaurant staff, the suited men who had appeared from nowhere to stand guard. Every assumption she had made about the man she married had been shattered in the span of minutes. "The gardening," she said finally. "Was any of that real?" A slight smile touched Kenji's lips. "My appreciation for growing things is genuine. Working with my hands provided good cover while allowing me to observe the financial circles of Boston, many of which intersect with my family's interests and our rivals." "And our marriage, was that just convenient cover as well?" "Your proposal was unexpected," he admitted. "But welcome. You saw me as human when others saw only hands that served them. That is rare in my experience." Amelia's gaze moved from the offered ring to Kenji's face, searching for deception and finding none. Only the direct honesty that had first drawn her to him, now accompanied by an authority he had previously concealed. "I don't know anything about your world," she said finally. "And I have lived in yours for 3 years, invisible but watching," he replied. "Perhaps that gives us each something to teach the other." The restaurant owner reappeared, kneeling at the threshold, until Kenji acknowledged him with a slight nod. Haruki entered bearing a tray with ceremonial tea implements, setting them before Kenji, with elaborate care before withdrawing again. "This would traditionally have been part of our wedding ceremony," Kenji explained, beginning to prepare the tea with practiced movements. "If you'll permit me, I would like to honor you properly now, as my wife." Amelia watched his hands, the same hands she had observed tending roses with such care, now performing the tea ceremony with flawless precision. The contradiction was striking. The gentle gardener and the powerful criminal somehow existing in the same person. "Why did Bryson recognize you?" she asked, as Kenji continued the methodical preparation. "How does he know who the Takahashi Gumi are?" "Your former fiancé's investment firm manages accounts for the Yoshida Gumi, one of our chief rivals," Kenji explained without looking up from his work. "Not directly. They believe they are simply handling legitimate investments for Japanese business interests. But Bryson has attended enough meetings in Tokyo to recognize certain names and symbols. The Takahashi crest is well known in specific circles." He completed the tea preparation and presented her with the first bowl, bowing as he offered it. The gesture was both courtship and respect, an acknowledgement of the unusual circumstances of their union. Amelia accepted the bowl, their fingers briefly touching during the exchange. Despite the shock of the past hour, She found herself oddly calm. Perhaps it was the surreal quality of the situation, or perhaps it was the realization that, despite his hidden identity, the core qualities that had drawn her to Kenji remained unchanged. His attention to detail, his respect for living things, his careful observation of the world around him. "What happens now?" she asked, after taking a ceremonial sip of the bitter green tea. "That depends on you," Kenji replied. "I will be returning to Tokyo soon. It's time to reclaim my position and address those who betrayed my family. That path is dangerous but necessary. And my role in all this would be partner, protected, powerful, but never again diminished," he said simply. "I would never ask you to be less than you are capable of being." The contrast with Bryson's subtle undermining throughout their relationship was stark. Where her former fiancé had consistently tried to mold her into his idea of a proper society wife, Kenji offered recognition of her strength, even as he revealed his own. As if reading her thoughts, he added, "You married a gardener who showed respect for living things. That man still exists, behind the titles and the responsibilities. The question is whether that man is enough, now that you know what accompanies him." Amelia set down the tea bowl, her decision crystallizing with unexpected clarity. "I need time to think," she said. "This is considerably more complicated than I anticipated when I proposed to you in the moonlight." Kenji nodded, accepting her response without argument. "Of course. I've prepared a place where you can consider your options in complete security and privacy." He gestured to one of the suited men who had remained just outside the door. The man approached, bowing deeply before presenting a set of keys to Amelia. "These are for a residence outside the city," Kenji explained. "It's properly staffed and secure. You'll have everything you need while you make your decision." The practicality of his approach, offering space rather than pressuring for an immediate answer, confirmed what Amelia was beginning to understand. Despite the shocking revelations about his identity, Kenji's fundamental character remained consistent with the man she had chosen to marry. As they completed the ceremonial tea, Amelia found herself observing him with new awareness, the careful precision of his movements, the subtle authority in his bearing that must have been deliberately suppressed during his years as a gardener, the intricate tattoo visible beneath his rolled sleeve, telling a story she couldn't yet read, but that had immediately transformed Bryson from tormentor to supplicant in mere seconds. She had married a stranger this morning, only to discover by afternoon that he was an even greater stranger than she had imagined. Yet somehow, in the midst of these revelations, she felt oddly certain that she had glimpsed something genuine in both versions of the man before her, the quiet gardener and the powerful heir. Which version was the true Kenji Takahashi remained to be seen, but Amelia was surprised to discover she wanted to find out. The residence, outside the city, turned out to be a traditional Japanese house nestled within a modern security compound, 20 miles north of Boston. As the sleek black car with privacy windows passed through imposing gates that opened automatically, Amelia caught her first glimpse of her husband's true world. The property was substantial, but not ostentatious, its perimeter marked by tasteful stone walls that Amelia now recognized as both aesthetic and functional security measures. The gardens surrounding the main house displayed the same careful attention to detail she had observed in Kenji's work at her family's estate, though here the design incorporated traditional Japanese elements: stone lanterns, a small pond with koi, carefully raked gravel patterns. Security personnel bowed deeply as Kenji escorted her from the car, their deference both professional and personal. The transition from unassuming gardener to respected authority figure had happened so completely that Amelia found herself wondering which version was the performance and which the reality. The interior of the house balanced traditional Japanese aesthetics with modern luxury. Minimal furnishings of exceptional quality, clean lines, and abundant natural light created a space that felt both serene and substantial. Nothing was excessive or showy, yet every element, from the hand-painted sliding doors to the temple-grade cypress wood flooring, spoke of extraordinary resources carefully deployed. "This has been your home?" Amelia asked, as a staff member quietly disappeared with her small overnight bag. "While working at our estate?" "One of several residences," Kenji replied, leading her through the main living area toward what appeared to be a private wing. "I maintained an apartment near the commuter rail for appearances, but spent most nights here. The living quarters he showed her were spacious and elegant. A bedroom with views of the garden, adjoining bathroom with traditional wooden soaking tub, a small private sitting area. Like the rest of the house, these spaces combine Japanese aesthetics with Western comforts and seamless integration. "You'll have complete privacy here," he assured her. "The staff understand discretion is paramount. If you need anything, simply use the intercom." Amelia turned to face him directly, still struggling to reconcile the man before her, confident, authoritative, clearly accustomed to command, with the quiet gardener she had impulsively married hours earlier. "I need answers more than amenities," she said, "starting with the truth about why you accepted my proposal. Was it simply convenient cover for whatever plans you've been developing?" Kenji considered her question with characteristic thoroughness before responding. "Your proposal was unexpected but provided elegant resolution to several problems. Legal residency in America has been useful, but increasingly complicated to maintain with false documentation. Marriage to a U.S. citizen resolves those issues." The pragmatic answer stung more than Amelia had anticipated. "So, it was purely strategic." "I didn't say that," he corrected gently. "Strategic, yes. Purely no. I accepted your proposal because I respected you. You didn't know me. I observed you for 3 years," he countered. "I watched how you spoke to service staff with genuine courtesy, how you defended the young groundskeeper when your mother wanted him fired for a minor mistake, how you read in the garden, completely absorbed, unaware of being watched. I knew more about your character than you might imagine." The realization that he had been studying her while she remained oblivious was unsettling, all while concealing your true identity and purpose. "Yes," he acknowledged without defensiveness. "Necessity required it." Amelia moved to the window, looking out at the carefully maintained landscape. "You said earlier your father was assassinated, and people believed you were killed as well. What happened?" For the first time, Kenji's composed expression faltered slightly. 3 years ago, rivals within the Yoshida-gumi saw opportunity in targeting the Takahashi leadership. My father was killed during what should have been a routine meeting about territory agreements. I was severely injured, but managed to escape. With the help of loyal family members, I arranged for reports of my death to be believed while I recovered and developed a strategy for response. And that strategy involved becoming a gardener in Boston? It involved patience, he corrected, allowing our enemies to believe themselves successful while I identified the full network of betrayal. Many of our American business interests connect through Boston financial institutions. My position at your family's estate provided perfect cover for observation while keeping me physically distant from those who might recognize me. The clinical detachment with which he discussed assassination and strategic deception made Amelia realize how completely she had entered an unfamiliar world. "And now, you said you're returning to Tokyo soon." "It's time," he confirmed. "The necessary pieces are in position. Those responsible for my father's death must face consequences, and loyal family members deserve the protection of proper leadership, which you'll provide by reclaiming your position as heir to a criminal organization," Amelia stated, needing to articulate the reality aloud. Kenji didn't flinch from the description. "The Takahashi Gumi is complex, with interests spanning legitimate businesses, political relationships, and yes, activities outside conventional law. I was raised to continue that legacy with all its complications." Amelia turned from the window to study him directly. In his perfectly tailored suit, with his natural authority now unconcealed, he bore little resemblance to the humble gardener who had tended her family's roses with such care. Yet something essential remained, unchanged, a centered quality, a mindfulness about his movements and words that had first drawn her attention. "I need time alone," she decided, "to think about everything that's happened today." "Of course." Kenji moved toward the door, then paused. "One thing you should know. Despite the circumstances and complications, I meant what I said in our vows this morning. I will honor and protect you, whether you choose to continue our marriage or not." After he left, Amelia sank onto the edge of the bed, the events of the day crashing over her. In less than 12 hours, she had married a man she thought she understood, discovered he was someone else entirely, and found herself contemplating a future that bore no resemblance to anything she had ever imagined. The rational choice would be to end this arrangement immediately, accept Kenji's offer of security, file for annulment, and attempt to rebuild her life on more solid ground. Yet something held her back from that obvious conclusion. Perhaps it was the memory of his hands tending damaged roses with such care, or the calm certainty with which he had confronted Bryson's cruelty, or simply the realization that, despite his deception about identity, he had never once made her feel diminished. Amelia spent the evening exploring the compound, finding unexpected peace in its careful design. The gardens particularly captured her attention, clearly Kenji's personal work rather than merely staff-maintained. Each arrangement showed the same thoughtful attention she had observed in his care of the Blackwood estate grounds, suggesting that this aspect, at least, had been genuine rather than performance. As darkness fell, she found herself drawn to a small building separate from the main house. Inside, traditional tatami flooring and sparse furnishings created a meditative space, but what caught her attention was the far wall covered with books, philosophy, art, strategy, history, in both English and Japanese. A worn leather chair positioned by the window suggested regular use, while a desk held neat stacks of papers covered with handwritten notes. This was Kenji's private study, she realized, not a stage space for visitors, but a personal sanctuary. The books showed evidence of having been read repeatedly, some marked with notes, others positioned for easy reference. Works by Musashi and Sun Tzu shared space with modern business strategists and classical literature. One volume of Japanese poetry lay open on a small table, a pressed cherry blossom serving as bookmark. The discovery of this space, scholarly, contemplative, deeply personal, provided another piece of the complex puzzle that was Kenji Takahashi. Whatever else he might be, he was not merely the brutal criminal figure Western movies might suggest, nor simply the quiet gardener he had pretended to be. The reality appeared to be something far more nuanced. Morning found Amelia in the garden, watching koi swim lazy circles in the stone pond as she considered her decision. A staff member had silently delivered breakfast to her room, along with a note from Kenji, informing her that he would be attending to business matters, but would return by midday if she wished to speak with him. The formal politeness of the note, giving her space while remaining accessible, reinforced what she was beginning to understand about the man she had married. Despite his hidden identity and agenda, his consideration for her agency remained consistent. He had offered her this secure space to think, provided for her comfort without intrusion, and placed no pressure on her decision timeline. When Kenji returned shortly after noon, Amelia was waiting in the main living area, her overnight bag packed and placed near the door. His expression revealed nothing as he noted this detail, though something flickered briefly in his eyes. "I've made my decision," she said without preamble. "I see." His tone was carefully neutral. "The car can take you wherever you wish to go." "That won't be necessary yet," Amelia replied. "I'd like to see the rest of the house first." Surprise registered briefly before Kenji's composure returned. Of course. What followed was essentially a tour of his world, not just the physical spaces of the compound, but the operational reality of the Takahashi organization as it existed in America. Kenji showed her the security center with its advanced monitoring systems, the communications hub that maintained encrypted contact with operations in Japan and elsewhere, the carefully maintained records of legitimate business investments that provided cover for more complex financial arrangements. Throughout this education, he answered her questions with direct honesty, neither glorifying nor apologizing for the nature of his family's operations. Yes, certain activities existed outside conventional law. No, violence was not the primary business model, but rather a regrettable necessity in specific circumstances. The organization's income derived largely from entertainment venues, property investments, and private security contracts, with other revenue streams she could choose to learn about or remain ignorant of, as she preferred. They ended in the garden, seated on a stone bench overlooking the koi pond, cherry trees creating dappled shadows across the water's surface. "The gardening," Amelia said finally, "that was real, wasn't it? Not just a cover." "Yes," Kenji confirmed. "Working with living things provides balance to the more complicated aspects of my responsibilities. Plants respond to care and attention without politics or betrayal. There's honesty in cultivation that I find necessary." It was this answer, more than anything else he had revealed throughout the day, that solidified Amelia's decision. "I married a gardener who showed respect for living things," she said, echoing his earlier words. "That man still exists behind the titles and the responsibilities. I believe That man is worth knowing. Kenji's carefully controlled expression softened. Does this mean you're choosing to continue our arrangement? I'm choosing to give it a genuine opportunity, she clarified. I can't pretend to understand your world yet, but I recognize honor when I see it. That's more than I found in the world I came from. The relief in his eyes was subtle, but unmistakable. Your decision honors me, he said simply. I have conditions, Amelia continued. I want complete honesty between us going forward. I need to understand what I'm part of, even aspects that might be difficult to hear. And I want to maintain my work with the Blackwood Foundation. The charitable initiatives matter to me. All reasonable requests, he agreed. Honesty within these walls will be absolute, though public discretion remains necessary. Your foundation work can continue with appropriate security arrangements. I would never ask you to abandon meaningful purpose. And Tokyo? You mentioned returning soon. Within the month, Kenji confirmed. Though you needn't accompany me immediately, establishing your comfort and security would take priority. Amelia considered this, weighing the prospect of leaving behind everything familiar against the opportunity to truly understand the complex man she had married. I would prefer to go with you, she decided. If I'm committing to this path, I should see it clearly from the beginning. 6 months later, Amelia stood in the private tea house within the Takahashi compound in Tokyo, making final preparations for receiving the wives of important business associates. Her language skills had improved dramatically through daily practice and formal instruction, allowing her to navigate complex social interactions with growing confidence. The traditional kimono she wore for these occasions had become less foreign to her body, though she still appreciated the assistance of Hana, the household staff member who helped with the elaborate dressing process. The heavy silk, patterned with subtle cherry blossoms against a deep blue background, represented her position as wife of the Takahashi heir, formal, respectful of tradition, but with subtle elements of her own aesthetic preferences incorporated. Takahashi-sama approaches, Hana murmured, completing a final adjustment to Amelia's obi before withdrawing discreetly. Moments later, Kenji entered the tea house. Though he frequently wore Western business attire for day-to-day operations, today he was dressed in traditional formal clothing for an important family ceremony later that afternoon. The transformation suited him, an acknowledgement of heritage and position that completed Amelia's evolving understanding of the man she had married. The Matsuda and Endo representatives have arrived at the main gate, he informed her. Their wives will join you momentarily. Thank you, she replied, making a small adjustment to the flower arrangement she had created for the tea ceremony. Is everything prepared for the memorial ceremony? Kenji nodded. All is in order. Your presence would be welcome, but not obligatory. The memorial would honor his father on the anniversary of his death, now that Kenji had officially reclaimed leadership of the family. The past months had seen careful, strategic moves to consolidate power and address those responsible for the assassination. Amelia had chosen not to know all details of how justice had been administered, but understood from the increased stability within the organization that Kenji's authority was now firmly established. I'll attend, she decided. It's important to honor family traditions. Something like approval flickered in Kenji's eyes. The car will return for you after your tea gathering concludes. As he turned to leave, Amelia called him back with a question that had been forming since their arrival in Japan. The staff here, the business associates, even your most senior advisors, they seemed surprised by my presence, by our marriage. Was that reaction expected? Kenji considered her question with characteristic thoroughness. In my position, marriage is typically strategic, arranged between allied families. My choice to marry outside those expectations, particularly to a Western woman, was unprecedented. Yet no one has openly questioned it, she observed. They wouldn't dare, he replied, a subtle reminder of his authority within this world. But their respect for you has been earned through your own actions, not merely your connection to me. Your effort to learn our ways, your dignity in difficult circumstances. These things matter in a culture that values proper form and genuine substance. The conversation ended as a staff member announced the arrival of their guests. Kenji departed to attend to other matters while Amelia prepared to host the tea gathering, a responsibility that would have been unimaginable to her 6 months earlier, yet now felt increasingly natural. The wives of the Matsuda and Endo representatives entered with formal bows, which Amelia returned with appropriate depth. Though initial interactions had been strained by language barriers and cultural differences, she had gradually earned a measure of respect from these women, whose husbands conducted important business with the Takahashi organization. Today's gathering represented not merely social obligation, but a genuine step toward acceptance. As she performed the tea ceremony with growing confidence, Amelia reflected on the extraordinary transition of her life. From Boston socialite to disgraced ex-fiancé, to gardener's wife, to the respected partner of a Yakuza heir, each identity shift had revealed new aspects of herself she hadn't known existed. 2 weeks later, business brought them back to Boston for the first time since their wedding. A charity gala benefiting children's education programs would be attended by the city's elite, including representatives from financial institutions with ties to the Takahashi Group's legitimate business interests. Amelia felt a curious blend of anxiety and anticipation as their car approached the venue, the same hotel ballroom where she had attended countless society functions in her previous life. Now she would enter not as Amelia Blackwood, daughter of privilege, but as Mrs. Takahashi, wife of a powerful Japanese businessman, whose true influence extended far beyond his public corporate role. "Are you concerned about seeing them again?" Kenji asked quietly as the car slowed before the entrance. "Your former social circle?" "Not concerned," she replied after brief consideration. "Just curious about their reaction. I'm not the same person they judge so harshly." Kenji's hand found hers, a rare public display of connection. "They cannot hurt you now, unless you allow it." The simple statement contained profound truth. The opinions that had once shaped her sense of self-worth now seemed almost amusingly irrelevant compared to the complex reality of her current life. As they entered the ballroom, Amelia on Kenji's arm, the reaction was immediately apparent. Conversations paused, heads turned, whispers erupted behind raised hands. Her former social circle registered first shock at her appearance, then confusion as they observed her elegant attire and confident bearing, and finally calculation as they noted the deferential treatment accorded to Kenji by hotel staff and event organizers. What they saw was not the humiliated ex-fiancée they had expected, nor the woman who had thrown herself away on a gardener. Instead, they observed a poised, sophisticated couple being escorted to a premium table reserved for major donors. Kenji was introduced not as a former employee of the Blackwood estate, but as CEO of the Takahashi Group, a significant international investment firm with expanding American interests. The social recalculation was almost visible on their faces, particularly when the mayor interrupted his conversation with a senator to personally greet Kenji with obvious respect. It wasn't long before Bryson approached their table, his manner so excessively polite it bordered on parody. Gone was the mocking arrogance of their wedding day confrontation, replaced by carefully constructed deference. "Mrs. Takahashi," he greeted Amelia formally, avoiding her first name entirely. "How lovely to see you again. You look absolutely radiant." "Thank you, Bryson," she replied coolly. "You remember my husband, of course." Bryson's professional smile couldn't quite mask the flash of fear as he turned to Kenji. "Takahashi-san, an honor to see you again. I trust your business interests in Boston are prospering?" "Quite well," Kenji answered, his tone pleasant but distant. "Your firm has been instrumental in several recent transactions, I understand." "Yes, absolutely," Bryson nodded eagerly. "In fact, I was hoping to discuss some new opportunities that might align with your investment goals. Perhaps a private meeting during your stay?" Amelia intervened smoothly. "I believe my husband's associates already handle our investments, but thank you for the consideration." The subtle reminder that she knew about his firm's questionable clients was not lost on Bryson, whose smile froze momentarily before he recovered. Of course. Still, should you reconsider my card?" He placed a business card on the table with careful precision before backing away, clearly relieved to end the interaction. As the evening progressed, Amelia navigated the social currents with newfound detachment. Former friends who had shunned her now sought introductions to her husband. Acquaintances who had whispered about her mental stability now praised her glowing appearance and worldly sophistication. Even her mother made an appearance, approaching during a quiet moment with the tentative manner of someone testing uncertain ground. "Amelia," Eleanor Blackwood began, "you're looking well. Your father and I have been concerned with so little communication these past months." "I've been adjusting to married life," Amelia replied, neither warm nor cold. "And learning a new culture. It's been an educational experience." Eleanor glanced toward Kenji, who was engaged in conversation with a Japanese diplomat across the room. "Your husband seems to have significant business interests, nothing like what we had understood initially." The delicate probe for information was typical of her mother's approach. Amelia chose her response carefully. "There was a misunderstanding about his position, yes. The Takahashi Group has diverse international holdings." "I see." Eleanor smoothed her already perfect hair, a nervous gesture Amelia recognized from childhood. "Perhaps you might join us for dinner before you return to Tokyo? Your father would appreciate the opportunity to become better acquainted with your husband's actual circumstances." The invitation, transparently motivated by social and financial calculation rather than genuine reconciliation, might have hurt months earlier. Now, it merely clarified how completely Amelia's priorities had shifted. "I'll discuss it with Kenji," she said without commitment. "Our schedule is quite full during this visit." Later, Amelia and Kenji stepped onto the hotel's garden terrace for a moment of quiet amid the social demands of the evening. Boston's skyline glittered against the night sky, the familiar view now carrying different significance. "Is it what you expected?" Kenji asked. "Returning to your former world?" "It's stranger than I anticipated," she admitted. "Like visiting a place I once lived but no longer recognize. Their concerns seem so limited now. And yet it shaped who you are," he observed. "The strength you've demonstrated in adapting to my world comes partly from navigating the complexities of your own." Amelia considered this perspective. "Perhaps. Though I find your world more honest in some ways. The dangers may be greater, but at least they're acknowledged rather than hidden behind social niceties." "Both worlds require careful navigation," Kenji said. "The difference is in understanding the true nature of power and how it operates." Cherry blossoms fell around them from decorative trees the hotel had placed on the terrace, a coincidental echo of the gardens at their Tokyo residence. Amelia caught one of the delicate pink petals, its brief perfect beauty emblematic of the Japanese concept of impermanence she had been learning. "Is this world what you expected?" she asked, turning his question back to him. "This marriage, this partnership?" "Nothing about us has been expected," he replied with the ghost of a smile. "From your impulsive proposal to my delayed honesty to this current reality. I was prepared for many outcomes in my life, but not you." The simple acknowledgement carried more weight than flowery declarations might have. In Kenji's world of calculation and strategy, admitting to unforeseen developments was rare honesty indeed. Their return to Tokyo the following week brought Amelia back to what increasingly felt like home, the Takahashi compound with its careful balance of tradition and security, beauty and function. As their private life settled into comfortable patterns, Amelia found herself taking greater interest in the legitimate aspects of the family business, particularly international relations where her language skills and Western cultural knowledge proved valuable. One evening, Kenji found her in her private study, practicing the intricate brush strokes of a particularly challenging kanji character. He watched in silence for several moments, observing her focused concentration as she repeated the symbol for truth, or authenticity. "Your hand is becoming steady," he noted approvingly. "The balance in your strokes has improved." Amelia looked up with a smile. "I had a good teacher." The simple exchange reflected their evolving relationship, mutual respect forming the foundation for something deeper neither had anticipated when standing before the Boston city clerk 6 months earlier. Their marriage had begun as escape for her and cover for him, but had transformed into genuine partnership through shared experience and growing understanding. As cherry blossom season returned to Tokyo, they often spent evenings in the compound's private garden, the transient beauty of the flowers a reminder of life's impermanence and preciousness. Amelia had learned that in traditional Japanese aesthetics, perfection was found not in eternal preservation, but in fully appreciating beauty during its brief existence. Perhaps that philosophy applied to their unexpected connection as well. What had begun in shadow her desperate flight from social humiliation, his strategic need for cover, had somehow found its truest expression in the clear light of honesty and mutual choice. Two people who, married for entirely different reasons, had discovered authentic connection neither could have predicted. In the garden's evening tranquility, with cherry blossoms drifting on spring breezes, Amelia reflected that sometimes the most genuine things grow from the most unlikely beginnings, a truth as applicable to careful gardening as to the unexpected flowering of their marriage of shadows.